Hi, Jack. It's Reeves. You okay?
You're asking me if I'm well? I was just woken up by a small earthquake or something of that sort. This tower is going to collapse if this continues. I'm not liking this at all, Reeves. You have to evacuate us as soon as possible, or else it won't just be a murder that you have on your hands, but real bloodshed, and me included.
Calm down, Jack. Calm down. Is everyone alive?
I just woke up. I still haven't seen anyone. Things are okay here, but I think that there is terrible damage elsewhere in the building. Reeves, I'll take a look around and I'll call you, okay?
This storm has wreaked havoc in the entire archipelago, Norm. 11 dead on the island of Mahu, crushed by a shed that collapsed. I don't have a precise count yet of the injured. We had to evacuate from the other islands to the hospital in Salé, but there's a lot of them. And I'm not counting the 100 or so who are without shelter I have on my hands. The number of houses and huts that were destroyed is daunting. And we'll talk again soon, Jack. And all this mess, I forgot. How's your inquiry coming along?
Don't worry about it, Reeves. You know Nolant, Jones' attorney? He promised me a momentous revelation this morning. Nothing less than the very name of the murderer.
Oh, yeah, that's something. Jack, I have to tell you that we can't evacuate you right away. The helicopter's busy for the moment with emergency rescues. The 3 rescue speedboats are a long way from Sagara, places where people are most isolated. We're organizing our missions, keeping in mind the people who are in maximum danger, you understand. But I'll call you as soon as I can do something for you all.
It's a total disaster. We can't get to the raft anymore. Our only hope of salvation. The elevators are broken, the stairwells of the suites, the lobby have collapsed.
The raft was practically ready to sail toward calmer climes. What a mess. It is definitely no longer possible to leave the island by sea.
And you can count the rescue team out, man. Those jerks have discarded us like old socks. You see, the natives are a lot more important than us. As if it weren't urgent to get us out of this hole before we all finish at the bottom of the ocean.
Calm down. It's useless to panic. I just had Commissioner Reeves on the phone. He will send us the helicopter when he can. He doesn't consider our situation to be alarming if we compare our lot with that of the natives of the neighboring islands that disappeared last night along with their houses and their goods. They're working like crazy out there, and with very little means. We should all be patient.
I might have the means to get us out of this situation, if the rescuers are late.
That is to say what?
I hesitated to speak to you about it until right now. The solution presents a lot of risks, particularly in bad weather.
Come on, deliver, Lorenzo. This is getting irritating.
Well, there's a hot air balloon at the summit of the tower, and...
What? You kept this to yourself all this time? And to think that we spent hours constructing that damned raft.
Bastard! Who do you think you are to dispose of our lives like this?
But you don't realize, it would be complete madness to take off on this contraption in weather like this. It'd be taking the risk of sending everyone to their death in the sea in less time than you could blink.
It's up to each one of us to decide if we want to climb into this balloon. It's certainly not for you to decide on behalf of everyone.
Well, after all, if you mean it, I'll verify that it's in a proper condition to fly, and then proceed to equip it for takeoff.
That's it. And you do well to hurry. And above all, don't count on flying alone. We are keeping an eye on you now, Lorenzo. A hot air balloon. Figure that, ladies and gentlemen. Lorenzo, the brilliant architect of this place, hid the hot air balloon from us. Yes, you heard right. A hot air balloon. A hot air balloon. A hot air balloon!
Is Martin crazy?
Stop your hysterics, Martin. It's not funny.
A hot air balloon? Well, one learns every day.
Well, what is this nutty story?
Lorenzo Battaglieri wanted to abandon us all and escape alone in his hot air balloon.
I don't know what to cook today. I'm just not inspired.
When I think of all the time I spent to make that damned raft, all for it just to float away. What a fool I was for not having brought it up to the heliport.
And you would have pitched it into the water from 100 meters high? Along with us on it? Better and better.
Okay, Clara. We'll get into Lorenzo's hot air balloon. We better hope it wants to take off. This is ridiculous. Why did we accept the old man's invitation?
You don't seem to be doing very well, Christina.
No, I'm hot. I'm cold. I don't know anymore. I have a terrible headache.
My God, my darling, how you must be suffering.
Get lost, Martin. I'll take care of her.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm going.
Thanks, Marco.
Why is he always hovering around you, Christina?
But forget poor Martin. You're creating a scene, Marco. I am really exhausted.
I'm exhausted too, Christina. Your lies are tiring me. I'm gonna go get some air. You're getting to me.
I'm fed up, Martin. It's been 2 days that I've been trying to reach the agent of Huron Nex, your so-called painter friend. And you can keep him, and the others, elsewhere.
You're ungrateful to him, Sonia. He was very useful to you 2 years ago when you sold his painting at the Art Expo in New York. He allowed you to meet many international clients.
You bore me, Martin.
Sonia, you're losing all control because you can't leave with your handsome Italian hunk and the hot air balloon, that's all.
And you're blowing your fuses because your raft floated off on the water and poor Christina has a fever.
Noland was going to reveal something to me yesterday evening, and he committed suicide. My number one suspect is slipping from my fingers, as if by chance.
Hubert, it's me, Lorenzo. I absolutely have to speak to you. Hubert? Hubert, is everything okay? But, what the... Oh my God, all this blood! Oh, how horrible! Listen to me, everyone. Hubert de Noland is dead. He committed suicide, I think. I just found him with his gun in his hand. There was blood everywhere. This is totally insane.
What a horror, my God.
He committed suicide. Are you sure?
Old Jones dead. Noland dead. Madness has descended on the tower of Old Jones.
What are you saying? Hubert de Noland? It's not possible.
No trace of fingerprints on this weapon. trace on the trigger. The murderer might have worn gloves. A bullet always leaves traces of powder on the skin around its entry point. Rather perfunctory for a letter of confessions. And why would a man like Noland have written this on a small scrap of paper? It doesn't seem like him. The piece of Jones's wheelchair that was missing is here. It's weird. Had Hubert de Noland stolen it? And if yes, why? There's already been one murder. I'm not going to leave this gun within the reach of all and sundry. With all of these systems connected to his remote control, Jones was sure to be the only one with total access. Here's the code. I want to know who came to Jones's office after 9 p.m.
So here, what is this? That's strange. Simbi Laktar. Simbi Laktar had come to Jones's office the evening of the murder. That's impossible. Totally impossible. He's a member of the staff that was fired 15 days ago. Well, look for yourself, Norm.
Thanks for your help, Lorenzo. Why didn't you talk to me about this hot air balloon earlier, Lorenzo?
This hot air balloon has never flown, and the weather conditions are particularly bad. I didn't want to give false hopes.
Oh, well, at the moment it seems we don't have any other choice than saving ourselves by air. Simbi Laktar. Does this name mean anything to you? I'd like to know if you saw him these last few days.
In fact, I hardly knew him. Simbi Laktar was a housekeeper for Mr. Jones. He was fired with all the other staff 15 days ago. I don't think that he would have come back on the island. He would have been spotted. But I noticed the disappearance of his access card yesterday evening when I wanted to destroy all the cards. His was missing. Do you want me to see what Simbi Laktar did after that?
Gladly.
Look, it's odd. Simbi Laktar didn't move from the technical room after the evening of the murder. Here, you see, Inspector?
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. I'd like to chat with you for a moment. The items deposited in Walter Jones' safe clearly indicate that had he not been murdered, the marriage with Baina would have taken place and the heirs would all have been deprived of the estate.
Baina would have the queen's life that she so richly deserves. I understand better now why I could never totally hate this old fellow. He had a certain sense of justice, despite all his depravity.
Excuse me, could someone help me decipher this user's manual?
Well, to be frank, I was happy to be relieved from having to figure out the wiring plans for the special equipment on Walter Jones's wheelchair. Got to admit, I didn't know much about such things. But I remember having entrusted the plan of the tower to the design office of the Herb Deckard Company. The building of it happened during my break 2 years ago, so I don't know anything more, but I'm sure that the package insert will provide you with all the information you need.
Don't you find it a bit strange that the housekeeper, Simbi Laktar, could have been closed up in the technical room for 3 days without anyone noticing?
Of course, Inspector. It makes no sense at all.
Did Hubert de Noland have a suicidal temperament?
An old shark like Noland dies of old age in his bed, Norm. He doesn't commit suicide.
Very well, thank you.
Who were the last people that step in the library before the murder? Noland and Simbi Laktar were the last people who were present at the scene of the crime.
Noland the attorney and a certain Simbi Laktar were the last people to make an appearance at the scene of the crime before the murder of the billionaire.
Hats off. You're getting closer, Jack. But who is this Simbi Laktar who's just appeared out of nowhere?
Simbi Laktar is a former employee of Walter Jones. He's one of the natives who was fired some 15 days back. He lived on a neighboring island.
It's strange, Inspector. The death of Hubert de Noland saddens me more than that of my grandfather. Poor man.
The items deposited in Walter Jones' safe clearly indicate that had he not been murdered, the marriage with Baina would have taken place, and you would all have been disinherited.
Oh, well, Mr. Norm. Don't we say that all unhappiness brings its share of happiness? My grandfather is dead, and it's surely sad. But if he weren't dead, I would not have found these items. Isn't that so? And this vicious little Baina would have helped herself to our estate.
Noland had hastily written up evasive confessions on a piece of paper. Do you think that one has to look for an explanation of his suicide in them?
Maybe he was a man who had a sense of honor after all. This letter signed by him seems authentic, doesn't it? In the end, it's your job, Mr. Norm.
Did Hubert de Noland have a suicidal temperament?
I didn't really know Hubert de Noland, but I have trouble believing that he was the sort of man who would commit suicide.
Simbi Laktar. Does this name mean anything to you? I'd like to know if you saw him these last few days.
No, I don't know this individual, Mr. Norm.
I get it.
Well, looks like you now have a new corpse on your hands, Inspector.
The items deposited in Walter Jones' safe clearly indicate that had he not been murdered, the marriage with Baina would have taken place and the heirs would all have been deprived of the estate.
I think that Walter Jones' deception intended to disinherit his grandchildren is particularly vicious. To marry a young woman who could be his great-grandchild. Can you believe that? But I'm not really surprised that this man had such a scheme. Mr. Jones was not a commendable man, Inspector. And rather fortunately, if I dare say, destiny was able to thwart his Machiavellian plans.
Simbi Laktar. Does this name mean anything to you? I'd like to know if you saw him these last few days.
I don't know this man, Inspector. I made absolutely no connections on this island. It's pretty simple. I didn't meet anyone. Except, of course, the members of the family and Colio and Baina, the two natives.
Did Hubert de Noland have a suicidal temperament?
I didn't know Mr. Nolan for real, Inspector. And I'd be pretty incapable of telling you if this man had a suicidal temperament.
I get it. I would like to ask you 2 or 3 questions. The items deposited in Walter Jones' safe clearly indicate that had he not been murdered, the marriage with Baina would have taken place and the heirs would all have been deprived of the estate.
Walter Jones was an evil man, Jack. Nevertheless, I thought that he still had a little affection for his grandchildren. I am too naive. Walter Jones was a real crook. And it seems to me that Colio and Baina almost came into a lot of wealth. Too bad for them.
In our times, it's wise to go out with men who use precaution. Who is the last man who had the honor of using this prophylactic in the tower?
It's my private life, Jack. And moreover, condoms are not a misdemeanor, I think. Quite to the contrary.
Simbi Laktar. Does this name mean anything to you? I'd like to know if you saw him these last few days.
No, but I possibly don't know all the inhabitants of the island.
Did Hubert de Noland have a suicidal temperament?
I don't know, Jack. I didn't know him very well.
Sure, I see. Would you permit me to take a look at your bags?
It's very embarrassing.
If you prevent it, then I will be obliged to consider it as an obstruction of justice.
Then do what you want, Inspector. All right now. I am all yours, Jack.
This sordid letter from Isabella to her son Marco gives him a solid motive to kill Walter Jones.
It's the worst story I've ever heard, Jack. Marco never told me anything. Maybe he wanted to protect me. In any case, Jones got the punishment he deserved. But I know my Marco well. You mustn't charge him. You are mistaking your prey, Jack.
Don't you find... I need your assistance to clarify certain points. What can you tell me about your father and the conditions under which he died? And also, I'd love to know more about the relationship he had with your grandfather.
My grandfather took pleasure in outdoing his near and dear ones. He humiliated all of us, my father and my mother, Billy, Marco. What a monster. I hate Walter Jones and his perfect estate which he dangled in front of us to show us we were at his mercy. You know what, Inspector? I am thoroughly convinced that my grandfather killed my father. Walter Jones killed his own son. He killed my father.
This sordid letter from Isabella to her son Marco gives him a solid motive to kill Walter Jones.
I can't believe it. It's totally monstrous. Walter Jones is no longer my grandfather. I can't believe he did something so... Mom was a discreet and secretive woman. She died from shame and loneliness. But why didn't I get any of this? But Marco is a weak sort, you know. I don't believe he could have had the guts to punish a man like Walter Jones. Unfortunately.
In the absence of a will, this letter from Edward Jones to his wife Isabella makes Marco the principal heir of the Jones empire.
I didn't think of this detail, Inspector. So Marco's affection toward me could have been just strategy. He made me fall asleep in a way to swipe all the inheritance. If Marco played this double game with me, I will not forgive him, Mr. Norm.
Why did Walter Jones keep this compromising press cutting?
I am ready for anything now. While going over this shit, you got out all the skeletons from the family closet, Mr. Norm. I distrusted you at the time you set foot on this island, but today, I'm grateful to you. And I really hope that you can prove that Walter Jones had my father murdered.
What could have pushed Marco Jones to give up 10% of his future estate to Hubert de Noland?
It doesn't surprise me that Nolan tried to extort money from Marco, but I don't know why, Inspector Norm.
You told me that you destroyed this document, Sonia.
I lied to you, Inspector Norm. I felt that Marco was totally lost. I am his older sister, and no doubt I wanted to protect him. The truth is that I walked into my brother's room without even knocking at the door. Marco and Christina were sleeping. I told them about Jones's death, and this little slut Christina behaved as if nothing had happened. I had, however, smelled her perfume in my room. I knew that she had been dispatched previously by my husband, and this slut challenged me with a smile. I could have strangled her, but I had more important things to do. I took Marco aside and I made him a drawing of the place. I showed him the rings and the wedding announcement of Jones and Baina Jumhu. I told him I thought we were going to lose the estate since Walter Jones had not left any disposition in our favor in his safe. I gave him this diagram, thinking he could bring back the marriage act since he knows the tower better than me. I had good intuition, because it was not till later that I translated the inscription engraved on the tortoise that contained the wedding rings, Inspector Norm. The meaning of this inscription that would have despoiled us of the whole estate if our grandfather had married Baina Jumhu. I had therefore not spoken to Marco about it at the time. As for his slutty woman, she seemed bored that Marco and I were talking in whispers. She must have thought that I was revealing her adultery with my husband. I refrained from dispelling this impression, and all three of us climbed back up to the restaurant.
I understand better.
I did not like Noland, but for him, the problems are over.
The items deposited in Walter Jones' safe clearly indicate that had he not been murdered, the marriage with Baena would have taken place and the heirs would all have been deprived of the estate.
The death of old Jones is not a good deal for me, Jack Norm. Baena and Walter Jones were to have married in the chapel of the tower. Walter Jones called it the Chapel of Anna Jones. It is a very secret place. Now, Walter Jones is dead, and no one else can go into the chapel. Yes, this is really a bad situation. I had ordered flowers and sheets for the altar. I had also invited my friends, as well as a shaman, for the ceremony. It was a marriage that would have settled everything properly, Jack Norm. Now everyone is going to lose a lot of money.
Where is this chapel you're talking about?
It is hidden in Jones's tower, near his suite, I think. But only Jones himself knew how to get in.
This sordid letter from Isabella to her son Marco gives him a solid motive to kill Walter Jones.
Old Jones was the most evil man I ever knew in my life, Jack Norm. He hurt a lot of people around him. He was full of poison, and he is dead from his poison. Baena also suffered a lot because of him. And if Marco killed old Jones, then that is a good thing, and I say he was right.
Simbi Laktar. Does this name mean anything to you? I'd like to know if you saw him these last few days.
Simbi Laktar is a good fisherman and a brave man, Jack Norm. Simbi Laktar worked for old Jones. I have not seen Simbi Laktar since old Jones fired all the Maledivians.
Did Hubert de Noland have a suicidal temperament?
Hubert de Noland was not a man who had that in his head, Jack Norm.
Don't you find it a bit strange that the housekeeper, Simbi Laktar, could have been closed up in the technical room for 3 days without anyone noticing?
Simbi Laktar cannot hide in old Jones's tower. A bad man hides. Simbi Laktar is a good man, Jack Norm.
Surely.
Correct match. Is the death of Hubert de Noland a real suicide? The death of Hubert de Noland is a murder masquerading as a suicide.
The death of Hubert de Noland is a murder masquerading as a suicide.
Well, Jack, you have a second murder on your hands. You haven't done yet with this nest of vipers. The two crimes are connected, that's for sure. But don't forget, our priority is to arrest the billionaire's murderer.